Today, we're going to talk about why smart kids end up lonely. And one of the most important lessons I learned as a psychiatrist is that the solutions of today become the problems of tomorrow. The injury that you have is a small scrape, so it's nothing to worry about. You have not been damaged. You're not going to be disabled. There's no problem. There's no harm, really. It's just a small scrape. It'll heal on its own. So you should be okay. That's not what helps, right? Logicking your way when you're feeling bad doesn't work. What works is, oh, let me see that. Oh my God, did you get a little boo-boo? Oh, I'm sorry, it's not a little boo-boo. Oh my God, look at those 3 scrapes. Wow, does that hurt a lot? Okay, well, should we put some ice on that, right? Okay, like, do you need a hug? Oh, baby, let me hold you, let me hug you, right? This is what actually works. So this is another thing that we don't quite understand, which is that IQ is an offensive weapon. People who are super smart are like wizards and DPS mages. IQ is like flinging fireballs and lightning bolts to fix problems on the outside. I can take a high IQ kid, drop him into my private practice and say, hey, help me optimize patient flow through my workroom. Like, I can do that and y'all can solve those problems. I've literally done that before. On the flip side, when it comes to buffering your self-esteem, a wizard is like not really great at casting healing spells or defensive magic, right? That's really what a healer is for. And that's kind of that emotional capability. That's kind of what healers are, is they're really built into that emotional capability. And so what starts to happen is we start dumping our whole mana pool instead of solving problems on the outside, trying to buffer up our self-esteem. Because if our self-esteem is in shambles, we can't even leave the house. And this is the core trap that people with high IQ fall into, is that they've had sort of emotional stunting because they've leaned so much on their cognitive development. They start to develop these things like cognitive empathy. They start to become lonely and have low self-esteem, and then they puff themselves up using their logic. This is why I'm still a good person. I will logic it out. But fundamentally, that's like a wizard dumping their whole mana bar into trying to heal something instead of actually using the right kind of magic to actually heal yourself, which is emotions. And so now the question becomes, okay, if we're in this situation, what do we do about it? So the first thing that we've got to do is abandon our identity as a smart kid. Now, this may sound really terrifying because it's all I've got left. This is the only source of my self-esteem. But my friend, your self-esteem is already in the trash, right? If we stop and think about it, it ain't doing a whole lot for you anyway. So get rid of it. And here's the reason why. So the fundamental problem with having self-esteem based on your intelligence is that it teaches you that your self-esteem has nothing to do with your actions. If you really think about it, being proud of being smart is the stupidest thing on the planet to be proud of. Because what did you do to deserve that, right? Did you work hard? Nah. IQ is primarily dependent on genetics and maybe some amount of upbringing and whether you smoked a shit ton of pot when you were in your teenage years, right? That's really all it depends on. It's something that people are born with, which is why a lot of IQ testing happens with like 4-year-olds. So the basic problem is that your identity is based on something that you don't even need to take credit for. Like, you don't deserve to take credit for that. You didn't do anything. So now this becomes a huge problem because if your sense of identity is based on things that are outside of your control, that you don't actually do anything to deserve, it becomes really hard once you learn that, okay, my identity is based on stuff that is out of my control. Actions have no impact on your self-esteem. So when I work with smart kids and I ask them, well, did you try your best? They can't take any pride in that. What matters is the result, right? Well, like, it doesn't matter if I tried my best. If I tried my best and I fell short, I actually feel worse about myself. Well, hold on a second. Why is that? Well, if I tried my best and I didn't get it, that means I'm stupid. That means that I'm not good enough. That means that failure is inevitable. So now hold on a second. Let me understand this right. You're telling me that if you try your best and it doesn't work out, you view that as a failure instead of a success, right? Obviously, because it didn't work out. But think about what that does. But when you try to do those things, pay attention to what sabotages you. What sabotages you is that defensive arrogance. I can feel proud and stay stuck. Look at how human beings feel less alone. If we look at activating those emotions, human touch is one of the simplest ways in which we activate our emotions and activate a sense of connection. So the simple thing that you've got to do is, I know this sounds kind of weird, engage in human touch. Now, I don't mean go out there and start like touching people. Like, oh, Dr. K told me that I need to engage in human touch. And so you go and you just like touch someone. Don't do that, right? So what I would say is very simply offer someone who needs a hug a hug. So it can feel really embarrassing to ask for a hug. It can feel really creepy to ask for a hug. But as you go about your day, you may notice that there are people who are not having the best time. And you can say, hey, it sounds like you're not having the best day. Do you need a hug? Just offer them a hug and just give them a simple hug. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Remember, we got to start small. And you're like, well, what do I do after that? Right? So there's your intelligence again saying that's not enough. That's not going to fix my problems. I don't want to take the first step unless I can figure out how to do the last step. What comes next? And that's the problem. You can't always know what comes next. You have to start taking simple steps to start making progress, right? That's the strategy. The strategy is not, I need to figure out 1 to 100 before I take step number 1. That's what got you here. The strategy, if you want to get to 100, is you got to take one step, and then you got to figure out the second one, and you got to figure out the third one, and then you got to figure out the fourth one. But you can take one step at a time. That's the only way you can do it. You can't climb a mountain in any other way than taking one step at a time. So what I encourage y'all to do is try to engage in some human contact, right? And I know that everyone's going to meme about that, but I'm serious. Like, we know that hugging people leads to a release of oxytocin. Now, the common pediatric recommendation is that when you have a newborn child, that you do something called skin-to-skin contact. And there's some physiologic reasons for this. Babies have really thin skin and they can't maintain their own body temperature. So their skin is actually really absorbent for your body heat. So that's one reason. But the other thing is that we know that this actually facilitates bonding with kids, right? So human beings are wired to bond through touch. And even though it can feel kind of embarrassing, and that's why I'm saying don't go out there and ask for a hug, right? So how can we make it easy for you? You can offer a hug. And it may hurt to get rejected, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're rejecting you. That means that they may not want a hug right there.